Hello, welcome again to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
I'm Bob Scarborough.
And I'm Steve Hayes.
And we are your New Year's edition of the FAIRtax Guys.
FAIRtax Guys.
Yes,
Yes.
I have Fat Albert here. I imagine Scarborough, your scrolling banner is somewhere. We'll catch, there it is. We'll get a better look at that next week.
Yes.
But
It is in its retracted mode right now.
okay, first order of business. Happy New Year to both of you.
Thank
And
you.
Steve, we are always glad to have you on the program, especially here at the first of the year when we get to discuss the state of the fair tax. Now, I've got to say that the Alabama football fan in me is kind of disappointed with what has happened over the past couple of months, but the fair tax fan in me is really pumped for this year. And we have always known, I've always figured that in order to get the fair tax enacted, it was going to be a two-step process. First, we have got to get the idea planted in the Congress and also out in the general public that the income tax needs to go away. And then once we have established that the income tax needs to go away, then we can start discussing, what to replace it with. And at least with this new incoming president, he's not really on board with the fair tax per se yet, but he's with us on the first step. He has said several times that he wants to replace the income tax. Is
Right.
this the year that we can at least get that established? And once we start talking about what to replace it with, everyone sitting at this table anyway, and thinks that the fair tax wins that argument hands down. How do we go here?
I think you've analyzed it very succinctly and correctly, Bob, because at this point we've got a president, we've got his probably, I would say, lead advisor, Elon Musk, who are both looking at this for what it is. I mean, I think Musk is a funny guy from the point of view that he's not looking at a lot of the things that we consider important about replacing the income tax. He's looking at it from a regulatory point of view about how many regulations go away if you get rid of the income tax.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in it, because I've listened to him talk, and he was asked one question relating to tax reform, and he kind of dodged it. But his main thing was it has to be less complex, much less complex. Now, if you're going to get rid of an income tax, which is what Trump says, then the flat income tax isn't going to work. Why? Because it's an income tax.
There you go.
You're back to the obvious things which everybody has a soft spot in their heart that are constitutionalists for tariffs, because tariffs and imports were the way that we financed the country for well over 100 years. The problem is that tariffs, if you look at the graph, it goes like this, because as tariffs increase, sales go down of imported products and income goes down. And that's always been a problem with tariffs. It's not budgetable in the same way.
Yeah, they were never intended to be a revenue source. It was just more of a tool to ensure fair trade, that we don't let foreign companies dump, goods in our market well below cost and drive American businesses out of business. It was a trade tool, not a revenue tool.
And that's where I think Trump will really want to use it, is that, when he threatens Canada with 25% tariff, when we represent, I don't know, 80 or 90% of their exports market-wise, he's obviously got a huge hammer to get them to start playing fair. Same thing with Mexico. Why are they stopping the people coming to the border? Not because they want to, but because he has pretty much told them, if you don't, you're going to be forced to pay a much higher tariff. And they are such an important trading partner for them, even more so than for us, that, it has a lot of leverage. The other option is the value-added tax, which we've all talked about not very fondly because it becomes something that can be manipulated. And I believe someone like Musk is going to see through that if he's really looking at regulation, because value-added tax requires an immense amount of regulation compared to a national retail sales tax. Because you've got actually trying to apply the VAT to income based on services and goods, which is how the base would likely be, is going to require lots and lots of probably very complicated regulations, particularly with services. So the retail sales tax, the fair tax, is the simpler, and I think it's going to have that as its most endearing quality to his advisors, to Trump's advisors. Although, I mean, Musk is one of those guys, he's got the income tax licked, because he's got people that make more money than all three of us have made in our lifetime in a year doing his tax planning.
Mm-hmm. Well, he's
taking advantage of everything.
I said he's also going after waste and inefficiency. And if you want to go after waste and inefficiency, the IRS has got to be an incredibly target-rich environment.
It totally is. And that's what I'm saying. When he looks at regulation, he looks at a lot of that unnecessary. Like, I used to do this. I was, as I've confessed to you, I'm a recovering tax attorney. I used to read all of the Treasury proposals and comment on them and do all those things about how to interpret a particular section of the code. And now I look at it and I wonder, how could I have ever thought that was important? Because it is such gobbledygook that only a small percentage of people pay attention to, but it creates such havoc with businesses. Bob Scarborough's business, and I'm writing my next week's report, which you'll probably get today or tomorrow, Bob, to look at, to edit, as looking at regulations and the cost of regulations to the country, and then taking and drawing it back to the income tax. What would that look like with the income tax? And you've got not only the dead weight cost of trying to comply, which the tax foundation says is almost $500 billion, but you've also got the added other costs that inhibit production, because Bob has to look at how he's going to pay his employees, because he has to pay payroll tax now, and he has to be looking at what he does in light of what his ultimate tax bill is going to be. And so there's an additional cost of time that Bob could be spending, talking to you and I, or trying to figure out some way to make his business better, or basically just do something that helps, his community. And those are all things that the income tax takes away, to some extent, the opportunity to do for business owners like Bob. And Bob is one of the 90% of people that make up businesses in America. Only 10% are not considered small business. So, the big guys don't really care. Musk doesn't care, frankly, about regulations, not from a point of view of his own time, because he's got people that do it. And the cost of them doing it for the size of his operation is minuscule, even though it's, like I said, it'd be a huge cost for us. But it's an advantage that he has over small businesses. So if you get rid of the income tax, not only do you take the deadweight burden of compliance away, because what I was talking about with Bob isn't compliance, it's having to pay it, the payroll tax. You take away that and you give someone like Bob the ability to have that extra money to use to expand, to become more productive, to get a better camera, whatever he wants to do. And Bob, I'll let you respond to that, but because I picked on you as my example.
You're exactly right. And I always say this, that, time spent for the small businessman in preparing to manage the amounts of paperwork that's needed, the reports that go quarterly, semi-annually to the federal government. I'm also in a business that has government oversight from the Federal Communications Commission, which is a whole nother layer of work
Right.
that needs to be done. But that's an important, from a technical standpoint. You don't want somebody on a particular frequency in one city out shining or overbearing on
Right.
another station to the other side. So we have all these things that we look at. The challenge that I have right now in what we're doing and why the fight for the fair tax is so important, and how what a breath of fresh air it is to have people at the level that we have, whether it be President Trump or whether it be somebody like Elon Musk or Vivek Ramaswamy. Is it all a show? Some people want to think that that might be that, but you got the budget cuts. You got employee unions, federal employee unions that come in. I'm sitting here trying to, make sure that we serve Winston-Salem, North Carolina, the way we're supposed to as a broadcast property, and then looking at the intricacies of what we think is about to happen that could pave the way for more acceptance of the fair tax. And I've always said, how many opportunities have I missed? What's the cost to me by having to spend X amount of hours a month chasing paper around with regard to the tax implications, the tax responsibilities that the company has? So, I sit back and think, okay, well, let's just look at it this way. The House of Representatives could decide all of a sudden they take a look at the Department of Government Efficiency's reports advising. It's just an advisory commission. A lot of people don't understand they don't have any
Right.
power to pull the plug on anything. They can just send in a report that says, we feel that based on our findings and our opinion that this, whatever happens. So, is it the Department of Education? Is it half of a particular organization? It has to make its way through the political minefield, if you will, on Capitol Hill before it actually happens. But Congress, the House of Representatives, has the power of the purse, and they could very easily go in and take that roadmap that the Department of Government Efficiency has laid out, whatever that may look like, and start zeroing out based on that recommendation. So then the question becomes, what happens with the money that has been earmarked for that particular department? And so I'm sitting here thinking, okay, I've got, so many hours in the day that I can spend. Would I love to have all of the time that I spend on taxes and management of that side of my business to put towards, like you said, contributions to the community beyond what finances bring? The things that our staff do in the community is beyond is beyond the making of the dollar, and the advertisers that come in and help us support us in that way. So I'm confident that at least we have a brighter light shining on the challenges that we face, not only in total government efficiency, but the Internal Revenue Service.
Right.
I think is probably it would be a good place for the Department of Government Efficiency to start in what they dismantle. But like you said a minute ago, what's driving Elon Musk other than a greater view of what the entire government is putting a burden on us?
I think, it's very interesting because I think he mirrors a lot of Trump. See, I think Trump is really a libertarian,
I would agree with that.
much more so than a Republican. And Trump would like to find a way to get rid of a lot of these bureaucrats. Just think of the people he's had to deal with teeth gritted, who, last job they had other than for the public was when they mowed lawns in high school.
Right.
They've never had to meet a payroll. They've never had to make, a bank construction loan payment. And they're over there telling him, well, you're going to have to do this. And he says, what? Why? It's not in the law. Well, because we think it's best practice. And I've been in those meetings. I've heard those things. And you go, what? You mean best practice? What happened to the law? Well, we're given the authority to blah, blah, all this. I won't say it, but anyway, information you don't need to hear, TMI, basically.
Right.
But they delay it unless you do something you're not required to do, like commit another 10 acres to green space and agree to spend $1 million on a park. Oh, if you're willing to do that, then we can waive A, B, C, D. And you can make your payment next week to the bank.
That works. All right.
All right.
Let me kind of steer things back towards the FAIRtax a bit. As we're recording this episode on the morning of January 3rd, the Congress has just convened. They are talking about it. So by the time this streams, possibly what we're talking about will have already happened. But, there is some contention with Speaker Johnson. There are some people in his caucus that are not really too pleased with him. And last time that happened, the Speaker Kevin McCarthy, had to agree to a number of concessions, one of which was to bring the FAIRtax to a vote. Unfortunately, that never happened. Is the same contingent, does the Hayes crystal ball, which we're talking about 3 days ago, does it say that Speaker Johnson is possibly going to have to make some of those same concessions that McCarthy did? And is there a decent chance that we will get a vote on the FAIRtax in this Congress?
I think that he's obviously going to have to make concessions, and part of the concessions are going to be, I believe, to bring some of the, like Chip Roy, some of the people who are objecting, and put them in either a subcommittee chairman or a chairman of different powerful committees. And I think that's what's going to happen to get him elected. He's going to have to do that. As far as whether or not that extends to also promising to bring up the FAIRtax, that I don't know is there, because in this particular Congress, you've got a lot of people there who are really wanting to support the president. And their first step, according to what the president has said, is remake all of the laws permanent that were in 2017. So that's been his first step's immigration, okay? But his second step, and a probably concurrent step, is to try to move along this tax thing, because as you know, he took a much different tax package than he wanted because McConnell forced him, and McCarthy to some extent. They forced him to cut way back on what he wanted. I mean, Kevin Brady's plan that he talked to me about was much more aggressive, and it was much more in line with what Trump wanted. But it was shot down by McConnell, and McCarthy went along with it. So I think that's going to be the first thing. So in answer to your question, if a FAIRtax vote comes up, if it's brought up, I think a lot of the people pushing it might be reluctant to throw it in because they want Trump to set the agenda.
Right. Well, if Trump's agenda is to get rid of the income tax, at least that's step one.
It's a huge step. And I think the big thing that I saw from the election is that people are looking with clear eyes at really what's going on. They're looking at what is not being said, but what's actually happening.
I have a question for you about the tariffs. Get rid of the Internal Revenue Service. and tariffs come in. And we know that there's a way to work tariffs politically.
Right.
From an income standpoint, is that going to be more appealing to the general population of a tariff replacing them being liable for paying an income tax at some point, or is the tax still there when tariffs go in, if it's in political?
I think when they start really looking at the instability of tariffs for funding the government, that they're going to see that it's not the answer. Now, what I believe the American people, I hate to say this, but at this point would rather have, would be where they didn't see any of the taxes they paid. They didn't have to worry about it, but all they had to do is pay a certain amount and they were done.
Right. And the government at that time was much smaller and not quite as tentacles out into the bureaucratically holding businesses and individuals hostage to some, something environmental or something, some other type of regulatory issue.
That's true, but they did get a substantial amount. I think at one point it was like 25% of the revenue from excise taxes.
Yes.
Those are sales taxes. And they were primarily on liquor and other things of, I think in some cases it went in and out on tobacco. I mean, different types of products were subject to the federal excise tax. And so we've had a federal sales tax in the past. We still have it. Any federal tax right now, an excise tax, is a sales tax. It's just that it's hidden.
Right.
And I think in answer to your question, my fear is that the McConnell type thinking in Congress is going to not like the fair tax primarily because it empowers the people too much. Because they then see how much tax they're paying. They then see what's happening and they can measure what they pay against what they get. When you have it hidden in an excise tax or a value-added tax or a tariff, and it's really not even identified, it's hard for people to really spot the waste that's going on. Now, that's where I think we have a hidden weapon, because I think Musk, he can be pointed to that, to where he's really got, if he wants to kill the regulations, he has to expose them. He has to expose the cost. Otherwise, 4 years from now, they can come back.
Right.
Okay. So, he's really got that. One of the things that they talked about, or it's been rumored, the FBI wants a new headquarters. Well, put them in Kansas City.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah. Take the FDA and put them in Omaha or somewhere where there's actual agriculture. I mean, Department of Agriculture, not FDA. Take the FDA and move them out of DC. Move them somewhere else, because what happens, John Linder, who, as you all know, was the lead sponsor on the FAIRtax all the time he was in Congress, had done a paper on this about 25 years ago, which he gave to one of the committees that had asked for it, showing how that would disrupt lobbyists, because right now all they have to do is be in DC area. Yeah. And they can go lobby each of these other agencies, including the IRS. Well, move them out. You've got a guy coming in who's going to be named, it looks like, commissioner of the IRS, who was a FAIRtax sponsor every year he was in Congress.
Oh, well, I got an idea. Let's move the IRS to Fairbanks, Alaska.
I think it's a great idea, but I think we should just move them to the middle of the Atlantic.
Oh, that's even better. Okay.
And have Bob Scarborough punch a hole in the pontoon that's keeping them afloat, because there's no reason for them in this case. I mean, you're going to need a department of the agency if you do the fair tax, or you do the VAT, if you do anything. Now, let's back up a minute. If you do the VAT, you're going to need the IRS.
True.
They're going to have to come and audit Scarborough. They're going to have to come and audit Hayes, to be sure that we're doing it correctly and we're not gaming the system. So you're going to keep the IRS in place. And if you keep them alive, again, we're 4 years away from a possible administration that's going to want to go back to what we had.
Yeah, the window is very small. That people don't even realize right now. The work has to be accurate, precise, and targeted to see the opportunity, to seize the moment in the opportunity to do this. And I think that's where our volunteers across the country can take to social media and their neighbors in their own communities and put the word out there. And that I think is key, is going to be key. We can be on this program week after week after week, and if everybody sits there and gives lip service, oh yeah, that's a great idea, and then that's it, and then they're back to watching Gunsmoke on rerun. And and I don't mean that in a negative way, because I like Gunsmoke. Mm-hmm. The challenge is time is of the essence right now, and no greater opportunity have we had in recent years.
Well, since 1990, when we first started talking about replacing it with consumption taxes, this is a president who is willing to play hardball.
Oh, absolutely.
In other words, if you've got the McConnells and you've got people in these districts who are rhinos, Republicans in name only, or Democrats.
True.
He goes in their district, or he says to them, look, I'll go in your district and I'll say that you are supporting keeping the IRS. You're supporting not freeing us from the income tax.
Yeah, how's that going to fly?
Yeah. And I'm going to ask all of your constituents to contact your office. And you know what kind of rallies he can draw people to? I mean, if he goes into, I'm going to make up Omaha again, but if he goes into Omaha, he's going to have 50,000 people there. A lot of those people are going to pick up their phone and start texting, their member's office, because he'll have it posted. Here's the number to text.
Yes.
Congressman, blah, 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 or woman, blah, 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 blah. I mean, you're talking about a fellow who can play hardball with the best of them. And that's what you really need, because almost, I'm not going to say all, but a great many of the members of Congress are not really interested in the game ending. They like all of this complexity and all of the fact that people have to bow and scrape to them. You get rid of regulations, you do it. And like I think, and we've said it before in Chairman's report, but I think our volunteers out there and your listeners need to understand that if Musk and his commission and Vivek, they want to get rid of regulations, the one that they will most have impact on to the ordinary American is getting rid of the income tax.
Well, hopefully we can pull that.
A lot of these environmental regulations, it'll take years for it to filter down. But getting rid of the income tax, everybody, the day it goes into practice, into effect, are going to see the huge difference, and you're going to have such a sigh of relief that it's going to validate the benefit of getting rid of regulations. And that's what we've got to convey to Doge Committee. We've got to convey that to members of Congress, is that you've got an incredible, if you're really serious, you're not serious, then don't do it. But if you're really serious about cutting back government and giving power back to the people, this is the one thing you can do with a simple majority vote that's going to empower people more than almost anything else. because now they control how much they pay by what they spend. And they also see clearly the cost of government. A frightening thought to many in DC.
When Elon Musk acquired Twitter, now X, he had a poll on there, not scientific.
Right.
But, he stated, would you like to see me as CEO of the organization? And the vote was they wanted somebody else, and he ended up getting another person to go in as the chief executive officer.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's in the strategy that is before us, how we go about aligning our mission with the mission of the Department of Government Efficiency specifically, and in terms of President Trump's desire to reduce the reach and the size of the government. I think that's a very powerful combination of individual mission in the three, in the FAIRtax, in the Department of Government Efficiency, at the president, at the administration. I think that we have an opportunity to communicate that, because Mr. Musk is open for reflection. He's open for feedback and comments, and that shows on a daily basis on his social media.
Right. Well, remember the poll that he did where he asked about how many people want to fund the IRS more, how many want to keep the same budget, and how many want to get rid of it. 68% of, what was it, Bob Paxton, 230,000 or 250, something like that, responded.
Yeah.
Get rid of it entirely.
Yeah, it was over 200,000, and it was almost 70% said get rid of it entirely, which is
Yes.
hopefully something we can pull off here in the next couple of years, because even though the president's term is 4 years, there's a decent chance that at least one of the houses of Congress will change hands in the midterms, and that'll pretty much put the brakes on a lot of what's going on here. So we got 2 years to work on it, and we're also a little bit over time here, so I'm afraid we're going to have to leave things right here. Steve, we will certainly have you back on the program as developments within the Congress warrant your expert commentary on what's going down.
Well, thank you, Bob.
Until then, we'll again just have to wish both of you and all of our FAIRtax Power Radio viewers a happy new year, and we will see you back here next week on FAIRtax Power Radio. Till we meet again, I'm Bob Paxton.
I'm Bob Scarborough.
And I'm Steve Hayes.
We are the FAIRtax Guys, reminding you the FAIRtax is the only truly fair tax, and once you understand it,
you'll demand it.
So what do you need from me to get these taxes collected?
Glad you asked, because there is a fair amount of information you need to be aware of.
That's your tax plan?
Oh, no, this is just the revisions for this year's tax plan. What I need from you is you need to keep track of all of your income, as well as any taxes that you've already paid, also any gifts that you received or gifts you've given to churches or charities or individuals throughout the entire year. Do you do any side jobs?
Every now and again.
Great, because there's some more information about that right here. Everything you need to know right here. So just simply compile that, send it in to us. Be careful, make sure there's no mistakes. If we do find mistakes, or maybe we can fine you or, throw you in jail. So you might want to be aware of that.
And what do you need from me?
As an individual, nothing. As a business owner, or if you're doing side jobs, I mean, yes, you would have to collect taxes on that, but, well, it's all right here.
Can I get a copy of that?